I found out that my parents had quietly transferred the entire workshop, the one I'd been devoted to for over a decade, to my younger sister. No family meeting, no prior notice, just a manila envelope and a few cold words from my mother. Jessa has vision. You're just good with your hands, not your head. My sister smiled and declared. Finally, our parents recognize real leadership. So I stopped working 60 unpaid hours a week. I didn't say another word to them. When Dad called desperate because our biggest client was furious, I simply replied, let the air handle it. The rest, I'll start from the beginning. Don't worry, Lex, someday the workshop will be yours. That line has followed me since the days I wobbled around in the shoes Dad bought from a discount store, clutching a rusty wrench bigger than my own wrist. My name is Alexis Reed, 31 years old, a seasoned machine technician. My day starts by rolling up the shutters, flipping on the row of amber lights, with the soft scent of oil and metal flooding out my scent of home. I walk, around gently tapping the dew-covered hoods, listening to engines sputter, and gradually smooth out, making minor adjustments, so they purr just right then, folding the rag and placing it exactly where it belongs. Here, everything has its place. The toolbox, the crooked wooden board hanging loose from a worn-out nail, the plastic chair where I jot down notes, and Dad's promises like nails driven deep into the walls of my memory. I worked so much that friends stopped inviting me out. 70 or 80 hours a week became routine. $42,000 a year wasn't something I bragged about. People with my skills get paid more, and I knew it. Sometimes I'd scroll past job postings only to close them before clicking in. I kept telling myself I stayed for the family, for the faded woodboard, for that promise. Someday, the workshop will be yours. Midday. Jessa would show up dressed to standout perfume seeping into the air camera in hand, beaming in front of the lens. She'd pose next to cars I had just finished tuning, tilt her head for the lighting, ask me to step out of the frame, then post the photo with a caption, "Our team delivers yet another masterpiece." I checked the time, said nothing, and went back to my unfinished work. A co-worker glanced at me. I shrugged. Not the first time, and definitely not the last. To the customer, what matters is that when they turn the key, the car hums like a fish gliding through water. That afternoon, a middle-aged man came to pick up his car. He looked at me, not at Jessa's camera, and quietly said, "Thanks for calming her down, miss. Last week driving, it just felt off." I smiled and told him to come back in a week to check if anything else needed adjusting. I often print out thank you notes like that, cover the names, and keep them in a clear folder. Right next to it is a job listing. I screenshot the night before much better pay, which I also printed out and filed together. I don't know why I keep those documents. Maybe I just need a drawer for things that actually happened, so that if someone ever denies it, I can open it up and remind myself I did the work. And I did it right. The afternoon dragged on slowly. I added tomorrow's tasks to my notebook, underlining a few calls I needed to follow up on, then stamped a small round mark in the corner of the page, a childish little reward for myself. I heard Jessa laughing outside as she snapped a few more photos, sunlight falling into her hair like a thin streak of gold. I didn't hate Jessa, I just didn't know where to place her on the map of my life. She liked praise parties, and the phrase true leadership means foresight. I liked silence, the kind you can only hear when the music's off, the engine's off, and everything is still a car returning to its natural rhythm under my hands. When the shop was quiet, I'd pull a chair over by the wall, facing the worn wooden sign, the word thunder, faded in one corner from dust. Dad used to say, "Don't be afraid of grime. What you should fear is doing a sloppy job." I touched the edge of the sign dust clinging to my fingertip. I wiped it on my pants without thinking. Suddenly, I remembered being a child again, Dad's laughter echoing through the empty shop, and that phrase, "Don't worry, Lex. Someday the workshop will be yours," came back so clearly it was as if he'd just said it yesterday. That promise, I'd placed it in the biggest drawer of my heart. I used it to push through exhaustion, through rushed dinners of instant noodles, through the moments I stared at Jessa's photos getting thousands of likes, all built on work I had done. I didn't argue. I didn't ask for more. Because I believed in something simple. If you do right, you have nothing to fear. I shut off each row of lights, locked up, slipped the thin plastic folder with a few printed pages into a drawer, turned the key and heard the soft click of the lock. It made me feel lighter. On the way home, wind slipped in through the half-open window. The scent of the shop still lingered on my hands, a smell not easily washed away. That night, I touched the wooden sign and quietly told myself, just keep doing things right. Dad's promise will take care of the rest. The next night, I returned to the workshop alone to jot down a few numbers for a client file, thinking I'd be in and out in 15 minutes. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. Dad's office door was slightly ajar, the file cabinet half closed like someone had left in a hurry. I stepped in the scent of old paper, mixed with warm oil, filling the space, and pulled open the drawer labelled insurance to find a contract number, but my hand brushed against a thick yellow folder, its corner scrawled with transfer plan. Confidential. My heart thumped as if someone were knocking from inside my chest. Part of me wanted to slide it back and pretend I hadn't seen anything. The other part, the one that still believed the truth deserved to be named, told me to pull it out. The first page was packed with text, and on the third line, the sentence that dried out my throat. Full ownership will be transferred to Jessa Reed on the 60th birthday of Frank Reed. Below that, a law firm's stamp, a clearly printed date, and my father's unmistakable signature. The words blurred for a moment, then sharpened again, harsh enough to sting. I flipped through to the personnel section. 6 months post-transfer, we recommend terminating Alexis Reed's contract to ensure budget compliance and create space for a new management style. They wrote about me like I was an outdated machine. The floor seemed to slip beneath me. My hand froze on the page's edge. The following pages were email chains. Lex has enough skill to start somewhere else, need to secure Jessa's financial safety, avoid legacy influence on brand direction. Every punctuation mark felt like a nail being driven in. I lifted my phone and snapped pictures. The dry click echoed in the empty room. I photographed the cover page with the legal stamp and date. The clause about letting me go neat and cold. A blunt excerpt from one of the letters. Then, I put everything back exactly where it had been smoothed. The folder's edge shut, the cabinet turned off the light, locked the door like no one had ever stood there, reading their own life summarized on paper, teeth clenched. The way home felt longer than usual. I turned on the radio, then switched it off. At the first line, rolled the window down, then back up because the night wind was colder than I expected. The streetlight zipped by, like the pages I'd just read glinting and sharp. Back home, I opened the fridge, then closed it, poured a glass of water, then left it untouched, sat on the edge of the bed, then got up and paced the room like someone who'd forgotten what they meant to do. All night, my throat was dry, but I didn't want to drink my eyes swollen, but I wouldn't let myself cry. By morning, my face in the mirror looked like it had just been through a fever. I went to work as usual, throwing myself into every small task, just to keep my hands busy to let my mind breathe. The second night it happened again. I lay staring at the ceiling, listening to cars outside, flipping the lights on and off, hoping for a sleep that never came. By the third morning, instead of spiraling, a strange layer of calm settled over me. I sat at my desk, opened my phone, and placed all the photos into a new folder, naming it simply Stay Calm. I printed a few pages, redacted the names and addresses, and slipped them into a thin, clear plastic sleeve. Something like a raincoat, just enough to hold without my hands shaking. On the edge of the paper, I wrote 2 words: ask questions. I knew there was one place no one could avoid. No one could claim to be too busy, for no one could make excuses about the first Sunday dinner at my parents' house. There would always be Mum's stew, the old wooden table, and the same old stories about Grandpa in his youth. There, if I placed those papers in the centre of the table, amid the scent of black pepper rising from the pot between Dad's teacup and Jessa's gaze, then the phrase, "It's just business," would no longer serve as a convenient shield. I opened the wall calendar and circled the first Sunday of the month in red ink, my hand trembling slightly but completing the loop. That whole day I went about my work as usual, but in between the engine hums and customer notes, I noticed my heartbeat slowing down, becoming steadier. I kept reminding myself, don't lose your temper, don't jump to conclusions, just bring the papers and ask. Ask, so they're forced to face their own choices. That evening before leaving the shop, I paused under the wooden sign. I didn't touch it this time. I just stood there for a moment, long enough to understand that sometimes to keep a promise to yourself, you have to accept the sound of another promise breaking. I turned off the lights, locked the door, tucked the plastic sleeve into my coat pocket, and stepped outside. The first Sunday of the month, I brought the folder with me, reminding myself to speak little, ask clearly, and not raise my voice. As soon as I arrived, the smell of Mum's stew filled the hallway, and the wooden table was already set with dishes. Dad shared a few stories from the week Jessa held out her phone to show off new photos. I greeted everyone, sat down, and placed the folder in the centre of the table. I said clearly, I need everyone to read a few lines in here with me. No one spoke. I opened to the first page with the date, and Legal Stamp turned it toward Dad and asked, "Why is the entire workshop being transferred to Jessa?" Dad glanced at it and replied, "It's just business, not personal." I kept my tone, even. I'm asking for the reason. Please say it plainly. Dad said Jessa needs security, and you can take care of yourself somewhere else. I nodded, and pulled out 2 sheets I had prepared. One was last year's payroll record for me, the other a job listing for similar work outside. I placed them side by side in front of Dad. This is what our family calls security for Jessa, and this is how much my work is being undervalued. Please help me understand how this decision is fair. Dad stayed silent. I flipped to the page that stated the plan to terminate my contract in 6 months. Why was this written without ever being said to me directly? Dad frowned. You shouldn't have gone into my office. Those are private documents. I responded. If I hadn't, I'd still be living under a false belief. What I need is an answer to what's already been written. At that moment, Dad's phone vibrated on the table. The name Uncle Henderson lit up. Dad went to silence it. I said, "Pick it up. I want to hear how you explain things to a client." Dad answered, tried to reschedule. The voice on the other end grew louder. Dad hung up and exhaled. I asked directly, "For the past 8 years, who's been taking those calls every day?" No one answered. I turned to Jessa. "Can you explain why you deserve everything?" Jessa leaned back in her chair and replied quickly, "You just do the technical stuff. I understand clients understand the market. I know how to grow a brand." I brought up 2 specific situations. Last week, you promised Uncle Henderson he'd get his car in 2 weeks. Who got called every day when it was late? Last time, you told Mr. Patterson the car would perform much better with a few easy tweaks. When it didn't meet expectations, who had to explain? Jessa shrugged. If you want to lead, you have to dare to promise. I said, if you want to keep clients, you have to keep your word. I turned back to Dad. I stayed because of the promise that the workshop would be mine. I want to know how much my work is worth in this family. Dad looked down. You're talented. You'll survive anywhere. That was enough for me to understand where I stood. I asked again. You've been discussing this for 6 months through emails. Why not once call me in and say it clearly to my face? Dad stayed silent. I looked to Mum. How long have you known about this? She set her spoon down, her hands trembling, and said softly, Don't argue during dinner. I replied, I'm not arguing. I'm asking about the truth. Did you know Mom lowered her head and didn't answer? I folded the folder halfway, keeping calm. If this is your final decision, I respect your right. But from today on, I also have to respect myself. I can't keep working in a place that treats me like an extra and has already written down the date I'm supposed to leave. Jessa lifted her phone like she was about to record. I said plainly, put the phone down. This is family. Today needs answers, not a performance. Jessa put it down, staring at me. I continued firmly but clearly. If we're to continue this conversation, 3 things need to happen right now. An apology for keeping it from me, an explanation for why everything goes to Jessa, and a clear commitment that I won't be silently erased. If none of that is possible, then we end it here. The room went quiet, as if someone had turned off the sound. No one said a word. I waited for a while. No apology came. There was no new explanation. No commitment either. I took a deep breath and placed the plastic sleeve back in the centre of the table for everyone to see the first page with the date and official stamp, the next clearly stating the plan to terminate my employment. I've heard enough and said enough. When you're ready to speak honestly and take responsibility for your choices, I'll be ready to listen. But for now, I'm done. I stood up, slid my chair back in as usual, and said to Mum, "Eat while it's still warm." She looked at me, eyes red but still silent. Dad said, "Come back later, we can still talk this through." I replied, "When everyone truly wants to talk, I'll listen." I picked up my coat, slipped the folder into the pocket, gave a brief goodbye and stepped toward the door. I didn't slam it. I didn't say anything harsh. I just left with a clear sense that I had drawn a boundary. On the way home, I didn't turn on any music. My mind wasn't spinning like the past few nights. I had asked what needed asking. I had heard what needed hearing. What comes next is action. At 10 p.m, my phone buzzed. "Are you home? I'm standing outside." It was Mum. I opened the door. She was holding a bag of food and an old handkerchief. I invited her into the kitchen and poured her a glass of water. She set the bag on the table and said softly, "I made too much eat while it's warm." I asked directly, "You came because of tonight, didn't you? How long have you known about the transfer plan?" Mum looked down for a moment, then said, "A while. Your father told me to be prepared." I kept my tone steady. "Do you think I deserved to know sooner?" She bit her lip. I was afraid it would blow up, afraid the family would fall apart. I kept thinking there would be a better time to say it. I asked, "If it were you, would you want silence or the truth?" She paused. I know I was wrong to stay silent. But don't make me choose sides. Her phone buzzed on the table. Dad's name lit up with a message. "Don't let her blow this up. Pull her back." Mum quickly silenced it. I said clearly, "Put it on speaker. I need to hear everything so there's no misunderstanding." She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, it's too late." I nodded, still calm. "Then, let me say this clearly just once, tonight. If we're going to continue talking, I need 3 things from you right now. An apology for hiding this, a direct explanation of why everything went to Jessa, and a promise that from now on, nothing about me will be kept from me. If those aren't possible, we stop here." Mum looked at me, eyes red, and said, "I'm sorry for not telling you sooner." I asked, "Why give it all to Jessa?" She faltered. "Your father was afraid she'd be at a disadvantage. He thought you were capable, that you could survive anywhere." I exhaled, nodded once, and moved to the 3rd thing. "I need your promise that from now on, you won't keep anything from me that affects me. Can you promise that?" She nodded. "I promise." I pushed her phone toward her to turn this promise into action text. "Dad, right now. From now on, Lex decides for herself. Don't try to win her back with offers. I'm not in the middle anymore. Send it, and we'll continue." She looked at me for a moment, unlocked the screen, typed each word where I could see. The message was sent at 10:14 p.m. I saw the sent confirmation appear. I said, "Thank you, Mum." The air lightened a little. I opened the bag of food. There was a market receipt tucked inside, timestamp 9:12 p.m. The stew was still warm. I served a small bowl and offered to share. Mum waved it off. "You eat," I stated clearly so nothing would be left vague. "From today, I take care of my part. Don't expect me to return to a place that's already written the day I'm supposed to leave." I won't argue. I won't bargain. I'll do my work and leave when I'm ready. Mum nodded slightly. "I understand. Are you angry with me?" I answered honestly, "I'm hurt. I just hope next time you'll tell the truth from the start. That's all." She pulled the handkerchief closer, wiped her eyes. "I'm sorry," I said. "I hear your apology. I'll handle the rest." I opened my notebook and wrote 3 bold lines, letting her see I'd made my decision. Tomorrow, shoot, collect, call. Mum looked, then sighed quietly. "I won't stop you anymore." I nodded. I repeated the boundary one last time for clarity. "And don't promise anything on Dad's behalf. I won't accept any offers made behind my back. I'll only accept truth and respect." Mum replied softly, "Okay." I cleared the bowl, sealed the rest of the food for the fridge, and handed her back her phone. Before leaving, Mum glanced at her phone and sighed. "Your father just replied, 'We'll talk tomorrow.'" I said, "Don't respond. From now on, let me handle everything myself." Mum stood up. "I'll head home. Eat while it's still warm." At the doorway, she turned back. "Thank you for speaking plainly." I replied, "Good night, Mum." The door closed behind her. I washed the glass, folded the handkerchief she'd left beside her bag, and saved a screenshot of the 10:14 p.m. message to the Stay Calm folder. I placed the folder and notebook where I could see them clearly on the table, then double-checked the photos of the documents. I set my alarm earlier than usual. Tomorrow, I'll start with the quietest, most reliable person. I'll call each one, schedule each task line, everything up in the right order. No more arguments, no more waiting for anyone to change their mind. I turned off the lights, locked the door, and lay down. I knew tonight wasn't a happy night, but it was necessary. I had said what needed to be said and received what I needed in return: an apology, an explanation, and a written commitment. The rest is just finishing what's left. Early in the morning, I woke up before the alarm opened my notebook to last night's page and rewrote the 3 words more clearly: shoot, gather call. I divided the day into segments: the morning for photos and documents, midday for partner calls, afternoon for contacting key clients, and the end of the day for organising everything. I arrived at the workshop just as the doors opened, took the list of cars I'd recently worked on, photographed each one from the same angle, before and after delivery, labelled them with dates and a short note about the repairs I'd handled. For each vehicle, I attached a thank you message from the owner, redacting names and license plates for privacy. I transferred the images to the computer, created a separate folder for each car, then printed several representative ones. When the printer jammed, I didn't waste time fixing it. I loaded the files onto a flash drive and ran to the print shop at the corner. I requested immediate prints, checked the colour and sharpness paid, and returned to the workshop. I continued gathering praise emails, text messages, review forms, follow-up appointment notes. I only selected feedback that clearly described post-service results: quieter engine, better fuel economy, fewer error codes, and on-time delivery. I printed them out, redacted private information, and sorted them into 3 slim folders: smooth ride, long-lasting, on time. Next, I compiled a list of improvements I had implemented in the workshop over the past 2 years, logging vehicle condition at drop-off mid-service updates to keep clients informed, handover instructions for post-service checks, and a scheduling board to prevent delays, each item dated by its implementation. While sorting the folders, my phone lit up. Ethan messaged asking if we could talk. I called him back within a minute. told him directly that I was planning to open a new place, wanted to maintain the practices he had experienced, and asked for permission to use 2 of his comments in my records. Ethan said he'd follow me, asked for the excerpt to approve, and offered to refer 2 friends. His confirmation email arrived shortly after. I took a screenshot, printed it, and filed it with the client praise section. During a short break, I went to the back area to find Carlos. I told him briefly that I'd be leaving soon, asked him to keep it private until I made an announcement. He nodded, said I could call any time, and added that if the new place was run clearly, he'd follow, and even promised to recommend 2 skilled, reliable technicians. I thanked him, noted their names and numbers. Before starting the next round of calls, I set a 60-minute timer to stay focused. I began with technical partners. The machine specialist agreed immediately, as long as schedules were clear. The bodywork contact said he'd need to rearrange things, but was on board if the process stayed efficient. The paint guy hesitated, worried about offending the current shop. I reassured him I wasn't dragging anyone into conflict, just exploring potential collaboration once I had a location, and left the decision to him. He asked for a day to think, then messaged by the end of the day, agreeing to take on smaller tasks first. At the end of the hour, I had secured 3 tentative agreements, logging the time, key tasks, and each partner's conditions. Back at my desk, I titled the entire set of documents Performance Record and divided it into 4 sections: tangible results with before and after photos and brief descriptions, client praise with approved excerpts, operational improvements with implementation dates, and a partner directory with names, contact info, and agreed terms. I wrote a clear table of contents, selected 2 to 3 strong examples for each section, avoiding clutter. I backed everything up on a flash drive, uploaded a copy to cloud storage, printed 1 set to keep at home and another to carry with me. I reviewed everything again. It contained only the work I had personally handled, and the quotes I had received permission to use, nothing that touched on the internal affairs of the old workshop. Once the paperwork was done, I messaged Marcus to say I was ready, and asked to meet sometime during the week to discuss launching the new division, mentioning that I'd bring the full dossier. Marcus replied almost immediately, confirming a lunch meeting on Thursday, said he'd reserve a small conference room, and suggested that if possible, I should also bring a short task proposal to kick things off this week. I noted it in my notebook right away, listing 3 clear bullet points, scope, timeline, and expected results. I printed the Thursday lunch confirmation and placed it at the front of the performance record folder. Back at the workshop, Carlos leaned in and said someone had been whispering that I might be leaving. I gave a brief reply: when there's an official announcement, everyone will know. I didn't offer any extra explanation or try to smooth things over. In the afternoon, I called Grant Patterson, clearly explained that I was preparing to transition, wanted to maintain the same working style, and asked for permission to use a brief quote of his in my materials. Grant said he'd be free over the weekend and invited me to drop by to check out a car and go over his priorities. I recorded the time, address, and his main concerns line by line, then sent a follow-up message to confirm and avoid any mix-ups. By the end of the day, I had reorganized everything, placing the 4 sections of the file into 1 large folder with a plain white label on the front: performance record, carry copy. I opened my notebook and laid out my exit plan in 3 clear stages: 1, confirm the next location and working terms; 2, give formal notice by the book to leave no room for misinterpretation; and 3, hand off any unfinished tasks responsibly to avoid accusations of negligence. I circled Thursday noon for the meeting with Marcus and Saturday morning for the visit with Grant, adding red sticky notes with each meeting's agenda. I tucked the flash drive into my coat pocket and placed the file in an easily accessible spot inside my bag. On the way home, I mentally reviewed the checklist to make sure I hadn't missed anything. The printer issue was resolved photos, and quotes were in place. Partners and key clients had responded. Meetings were scheduled and the small task proposal was in progress. When I got home, I placed my bag on the table, double-checked everything one last time, then turned off the lights. Thursday's meeting was locked in. The performance record was packed and ready. What remained now was following through exactly as planned. I arrived at Hale Company 5 minutes early, sat in the lobby, and reviewed my folder, jotting 3 key points on a small slip of paper: real results, clear methods, respectful boundaries. Marcus came out, shook my hand, and led me into a small meeting room already prepared with water and notepads. I opened briefly. Today I brought real outcomes. I wanted a clean, quiet start, no noise, just good work. I laid out before and after photos of the cars I'd worked on, quoted 2 client remarks I had permission to use, and presented the list of improvements I had implemented at the old shop. Marcus flipped through the pages quickly and asked 2 direct questions: why clients trusted me more than the brand itself, and what conditions I needed to perform well from week 1. I answered plainly: clients trusted me because the delivery was on time, the cars performed as promised, they received follow-up check-ins a week later, and I was the one personally responsible for handling any issues. He followed up with a tough question to test me. What if a client demanded delivery in half the time? How would I handle it? I answered that I would decline unrealistic timelines, propose a more feasible deadline, and document the agreement so both sides were clear. I outlined 4 conditions necessary to deliver solid work from the first week: decision-making authority over quality, realistic scheduling, with no overpromising a dedicated person for paperwork, so I wouldn't be delayed by red tape, and no promotional gimmicks that could mislead. Marcus nodded, then presented a formal offer: an annual base of $85,000, 40% equity share in the new unit, performance-based bonuses, an initial budget for tools and workspace setup, and the right to select the first 3 team members. The estimated start date would be within 2 weeks of my resignation. I repeated each point aloud to confirm I understood correctly, then stated that I agreed in principle. Marcus suggested we begin with a small project this week to test the waters: a 3-day trial with clear goals. I opened my notebook and wrote 3 lines: task, scope, timeline, expected outcome, and committed to sending a short proposal by tomorrow. Moving to launch plans, I explained my preferences clearly: a short introductory post, highlighting principled hands-on work with 3 before and after images, and 2 approved client quotes. No mention of the old shop, no personal digs, let the results speak for themselves. Marcus agreed and suggested the announcement come after I officially left my current position to avoid any misunderstanding. We quickly discussed risk management, keeping silent until I filed my resignation, using only materials related to work I had personally done, and quotes I had permission for, and bringing nothing that belonged to the old workshop. Marcus said he'd assigned someone to assist me starting tomorrow, handling contracts, invoices, scheduling meeting rooms, and preparing documents for signature. He opened his calendar and sent an invite for next Thursday at noon to finalize the terms and review the small task proposal. I received the invite, took a screenshot, and saved it in the Stay Calm folder. Before wrapping up, we confirmed the best time for me to submit my resignation: 4:00 p.m. this Friday, after most of the day's work was done, to avoid prolonged discussions. I wrote down 3 action steps for the next 2 days: pack personal items, finish the task proposal, and prepare a clean, concise resignation letter. Marcus walked me out to the lobby and said, just enough, he didn't need drama, he needed results, like the ones I had just laid on the table. I thanked him, left the building, and messaged Ethan and Grant that I'd finalised my schedule with the new place, letting them know I'd confirm exact vehicle handover timing after I resigned. On the way home, I felt lighter than I had in days, not because everything was done, but because for the first time in months, I was being treated in line with my effort and had a clear plan for moving forward. At home, I drafted the small task proposal using the 3 sections I had noted: scope, timeline, 3 days, and measurable outcomes. I sent it to Marcus before 7:00 p.m. I printed 2 copies of my resignation letter, checked for typos, signed them, and placed them in a stiff folder alongside the performance record. I set alarms for both tomorrow morning and 3:30 p.m. Friday, to ensure I wouldn't miss the key moment. Before bed, I added one more line to my notebook: meet the paperwork coordinator at 10:00 a.m. Double-check the tool purchase list and call Carlos to confirm when I should make the official announcement. I turned off the lights and placed the folder where I could see it clearly. The resignation letter was printed, the schedule set. Now all that remained was waiting for exactly 4:00 p.m. tomorrow. The next morning, I woke up early and double-checked the contents of my performance record folder, the 2 copies of my resignation letter, and the small task proposal. At 10 a.m., I met with the paperwork coordinator at Hale, confirmed the terms and timeline, and received a direct contact number in case anything came up after I submitted my resignation. I returned to the workshop and began packing my personal items: notebook, pens, gloves, and a few tools I'd bought myself, all marked with my initials. Items belonging to the workshop were packed into a separate box, clearly labelled along with my access badge and uniform. I prepared handover notes for each ongoing vehicle current status, remaining tasks, and scheduled appointments with clients. I printed 2 copies, one for the reception desk, the other to place on my father's desk. I quietly informed Carlos I'd be submitting my resignation at 4:00 p.m. He should stay calm, and if anyone asked, simply say that everyone would be informed officially when the time came. At 3:30 p.m, I turned on my computer, drafted an email confirming my resignation with the handover file attached, and scheduled it to send at 4:01 p.m. to the workshop's shared inbox, my father's email and a copy to my personal address. At 3:55, I took a deep breath and reviewed everything one last time. At exactly 4:00 p.m, I knocked on my father's door, entered, and placed the resignation letter on the desk, 1 copy for him, 1 for me. I kept it brief. From today, I'm resigning. Here is the handover summary for the pending vehicles. Workshop property has been returned at the front desk. He looked at me, his expression shifted, and he said the family needed me to not overreact. It's just business. I kept my tone steady. I've listened, and I've made my decision. I respect the family's choices. Now I ask that you respect mine. He stood and said if I came back, he'd give me a share, that everything could still be arranged. I replied clearly, no, I won't accept new promises. I've already committed to a new place and I'm leaving today. Jessa stood in the doorway, phone raised like she meant to record. I turned to her and said directly, put the phone down. This is an internal matter. If documentation is needed, the papers I just submitted are sufficient. I handed my father the handover notes and pointed to each item to avoid future disputes. He stood in silence for a few seconds, then asked if there was anything else I wanted to say. I said there was still a final formality I needed Dad to sign, confirming he had received the resignation letter. He signed the corner of the document and stamped it as received. At 4:01 p.m, the scheduled email was sent, automatically. My phone confirmed it had been successfully delivered. I removed my access badge and keys, placed them on the desk, and said my final words. I've been here for 8 years today. I step away. I turned and walked out without further argument. In the work area, I shook hands with Carlos, reminded him to keep things running smoothly and not let the schedule fall apart. A young technician quietly asked if I'd be coming back. I told him no, and if he ever needed anything, he could reach out once my new place was announced. I passed by reception and clearly stated that the handover box was being left there with the itemised list taped to the lid. Out in the parking lot, I sent Marcus a short message. Done. I'll send the task proposal tonight. He replied that he'd received it. I messaged Ethan and Grant. I've officially left the old workshop. I'll confirm exact handover times for your cars soon. Please keep this confidential until I make a formal announcement. Both replied in agreement. As I left the workshop compound, I felt tense but in control. No more backtracking. No more waiting for promises. I got home, opened my computer, reviewed the small task proposal under the 3 previously noted categories, adjusted the timeline to 3 days, and specified the measurable outcomes and sent it to Marcus before 7:00 p.m. I took a photo of the signed and stamped resignation letter and saved it in the Stay Calm folder, along with the confirmation email. I reminded myself to go to bed early tonight. Tomorrow I begin my first proper workday at Hale. 4:01 p.m. had come and gone. The keys were returned. The email was sent. I walked straight out the gate. The next morning, I woke up to a string of missed calls and messages from the old workshop. I didn't answer the calls, just opened Carlos's message to check the situation. 3 morning appointments had to be rescheduled because no one could handle the complicated work. And when clients asked who the technical lead was, Jessa gave vague answers and rushed the technicians to work faster. Minutes later, Carlos called and asked me to listen to a vendor on speakerphone. The vendor said plainly from today, onward payment must be immediate, no more credit, and that morning's order was cancelled. I logged the time and content of the call without comment. Near noon, Carlos reported that Jessa had taken on a new client and promised both a timeline and outcome beyond their capacity. The client demanded a written guarantee, and the techs exchanged uncertain looks, unsure how to proceed. Soon after, the shop live-streamed their work. Jessa narrated while giving orders, requesting a part be changed purely for visual appeal, causing the team to redo the work and further delay progress. Early in the afternoon, a restoration project on a vintage car was pushed under pressure. Jessa chose secondary materials based on aesthetic preference only for them to prove incompatible after installation delaying delivery again. The owner threatened legal action and demanded a refund. I sent Carlos a single clear reply. Anything concerning me should be sent in writing. I will not get involved. He replied that he just wanted me to be aware because the situation was deteriorating quickly. During that window, I set a 45-minute timer to finalize the 3-day proposal for Marcus. I filled out the 3 key sections: scope, timeline, and measurable outcomes, along with a method for tracking progress based on work hours and post-trial feedback. When the timer rang, I reviewed, exported the file, and sent it on time. That afternoon, a new promotional video surfaced online. Jessa had authorized a $25,000 spend, with a media agency renting luxury cars and hiring models for a flashy shoot. The content exaggerated the workshop's reputation, and the comments quickly demanded proof. Industry peers criticized the approach as showy. That evening, an automotive blogger published a side-by-side comparison of Jessa's posts with archived photos of my past projects, pointing out that the bulk of the work had clearly been mine, complete with accurate timestamps. The post spread quickly in forums, and former clients began sharing the link with one another. I took screenshots and saved them to a public evidence folder, offering no comment. At the same time, 2 vendors messaged that they would only sell under immediate payment terms. One order was cancelled, and the delivery schedule became tangled. Carlos updated me again. 3 clients requested to withdraw their cars or switch to meet with me at Hale. Included was Grant Patterson. He sent an email cancelling his consultation at the old shop and confirmed our weekend meeting, stating he needed someone who keeps their word. I replied with confirmation and sent over a list of tasks for his review. I sent Ethan a short message to confirm the brief meeting time during the week, and he replied that he was ready. The paperwork coordinator at Hale called me in, handed over the room schedule, a checklist of required documents, confirmation that the tool budget had been approved, and a delivery timeline within 2 days. He told me to focus on the work. He'd handle all the admin. By day's end, Jessa posted a statement blaming former staff for sabotage and accusing competitors of foul play. The comments immediately demanded evidence, and many reposted the blogger's exposé complete with comparison photos. I didn't engage in the argument. Instead, I wrote 3 short lines in my notebook. Clients rescheduled suppliers, tightened terms, and the marketing content was met with backlash. One final line beneath it: stay silent. Let results at the new place speak for themselves. I reviewed the before and after images I had client permission to use, wrote 3 simple introductory lines for the launch post, No mention of the old shop, and sent a draft to the paperwork lead for review. On the way home, my phone kept buzzing with alerts from new comments. I silenced it, saving only the relevant links to the same folder. Once home, I checked the weekend meeting schedule with Grant, and the weekday one with Ethan reviewed their confirmation emails and locked both dates into my planner. My phone buzzed 3 times. Dad's name lit up and faded, then 3 more times, and silence. I noted the time, switched the phone to silent mode, and reminded myself, I'll pick up when I'm ready, and when I do, I'll speak in clear, exact terms. Before bed, I reviewed the 3-day proposal I had submitted. Marcus's reply had arrived on time. He agreed with the work structure and reminded me to come in early tomorrow to receive the tools. I replied to confirm. I plugged in my charger, pinned 3 key screenshots to the Stay Calm folder, turned off the lights, and went to bed early. Tomorrow, I'll follow the plan on time on task with no extra words online and no backward steps toward the old workshop. The next morning, I arrived at Hale on time, opened the 3-day proposal, adjusted a few small milestones, then turned off all notifications except for calls from my father and mother. I wanted to complete the morning's work before taking any calls. At 9:30, a voicemail appeared. My father's voice was hoarse. Clients had cancelled, suppliers demanded immediate payment, the team was in disarray. He asked me to call back. I saved the message, noted the time, and kept working until noon. At 12:28, I checked the clock. With 2 minutes to go, I opened my notebook and pen and listed the 3 essential points I would say. At exactly 12:30, I made the call, put it on speaker, and signalled the paperwork coordinator beside me to listen and record. My father got straight to the point. He admitted he was wrong, asked me to return, promised a share and full authority. I kept my voice even and asked one yes or no question. Do you respect my decision? He paused. I said, I take that as a no. And regardless, I would not return because I had already committed to the new place. I said there were only 3 things he could do now to prevent the situation from worsening. 1. Stop making new promises. Call each client back and give a specific, realistic timeline, no vague answers. 2. Write up a report for each vehicle, current condition, remaining tasks, expected delivery. Include refund or transfer options if delays occur. Send it to the client and keep a record. 3. Prioritize minimum payments to the most critical supplier to avoid being cut off. After stating these, I asked him to send an email within 5 minutes, confirming receipt of the 3 items. I placed the phone on the table and waited. At 12:37, the email arrived with the subject line acknowledged. I saved it in the Stay Calm folder. He then asked if I could return to help for a few weeks. I repeated my boundary no. The call ended at the 10-minute mark. Just after I hung up, my mother called. Her voice trembling, she asked me to come back for 1 month just to help through the hard time. I said, Mother, I will listen for 5 minutes, I will not return, but I will send you 3 contacts today, an accountant, a lawyer, and a mediator. I sent all 3 numbers, added short notes on how to schedule with each, and forwarded the message to both my parents. A few minutes later, Jessa sent a long message blaming me for sabotage and claiming I had stolen clients. I did not respond. I took a screenshot, saved it, and sent a single message to my father. From now on, please use email for all communication with me. Early in the afternoon, the paperwork coordinator brought me to the lobby to sign the room schedule document list and confirmation that the tool orders had been approved and would be delivered within 2 days. He told me to focus on the work and that he would handle the administrative side. When I returned, I saw my father standing outside the glass door. I messaged the paperwork coordinator nearby, then stepped into the lobby and said, I can give 5 minutes here, I won't go into the meeting room. My father asked for a month. I shook my head, handed him a printed sheet with the 3 minimum actions and said, this afternoon, please do these 3 items immediately. No more promises, no new posts. Let the documents speak for themselves. My phone signalled the 5-minute mark. I said, I have to get back to work, said goodbye, and walked away. Back at my desk, I sent an email summarizing the 12:30 call, attached a project status template, CC'd my mother, titled it Action Required Today, and saved screenshots of Jessa's message and the time of meeting my father in the lobby. At 2:45, Marcus messaged briefly, "We start tomorrow, tools are ready." I replied, "Received." Minutes later, Carlos updated me again. Grant had officially pulled out of the old place and confirmed his meeting with me as scheduled. 2 more clients requested to transfer, and 1 supplier cancelled their last order. I responded, received no comment. At just before 5, my father called again. He said payroll couldn't be covered this week and asked me to reconsider. I said, "I'm sorry, but I'm not coming back. I've already sent contact info for the accountant and lawyer. Please reach out to them today." He sighed, apologized, and ended the call. I sat still for a moment to steady my breathing, then opened my planner and locked in tomorrow's timeline. 7:45, arrival. 8 o'clock, tool check. 8:30, quick meeting. 9 o'clock day, one of the 3-day trial, begins. I double-checked the email from my father at 12:37, labelled it as responded, and sent my mother a short line. "I'm okay, take care of your health, just follow the plan and keep it on paper." She replied with a single word, "Understood." Before powering down, I reviewed the weekend schedule with Grant weekday, with Ethan, and the room booking for the contract signing all set. I packed up, placed the performance record folder in the front pocket, locked. The drawer said goodbye to the paperwork coordinator and left the building. In the parking lot, my phone buzzed 3 times with my father's name, then went silent. I logged the call time and set my phone to silent. That night, I turned off all alerts, closed my inbox, and set my alarm 10 minutes earlier for the next day. I felt sad for my family, but I did not reverse my decision. I had drawn my boundary, and I would follow the plan. On day 1, I arrived at 7:45, received the tools at 8 o'clock, and held a short meeting at 8:30 with the paperwork coordinator and the 2 technicians assigned to assist me. In front of the whiteboard, I set a 20-minute timer to keep things clear and concise. I wrote the 3-day objectives: reduce engine roughness, minimize idle vibration, and improve throttle smoothness. I assigned names to each task and marked check-in points throughout the day. When the timer rang, everyone understood their role. The test car belonged to a long-time Hale client and had 3 measurable issues: light engine flutter vibration when stopped at red lights, and hesitation during common speed acceleration. Marcus and I did a short test drive on a fixed route. Each wrote 3 lines of driving impressions and took a time-stamped dashboard photo as reference. Back at the shop, I divided tasks. 1 technician checked all areas prone to causing vibration, another examined the systems that might create acceleration delay, and the paperwork coordinator handled tracking forms and scheduling. The rule was simple: every adjustment must be documented and no changes should be made just for visual appeal. Immediately after the first drive, Marcus conducted a surprise check and asked, "What if the client requested delivery 2 days early?" I replied that we would not overpromise, would propose a more reasonable date and document it so both sides were clear. He nodded and told us to continue as planned. By midday, the team had temporarily resolved the vibration issue at idle, and the engine tone had improved. We did another short test drive, added 2 more lines of impressions, saved mid-process photos from the same angles, and by the end of the day, I emailed Marcus a summary of completed work tasks for day 2-3 reference images and the next day's task assignments. On day 2, the parts inventory was missing a small component that had not yet arrived. I rearranged the task order to avoid downtime and asked the paperwork coordinator to rush the purchase. Near noon, the part arrived. I invited a senior Hale technician to join a test drive to get an independent opinion. All 3 of us followed the same fixed route. The result was a noticeable reduction in vibration and smoother acceleration at common speeds. Each person wrote exactly one sentence of feedback and signed the note page. At the end of day 2, while compiling the one-page objective, tasks done. Impressions report, I noticed one mid-process photo was blurry. I returned to the lot, recreated. The shot captured a clear image, noted the time, and immediately updated the file so no discrepancies would arise during review. I reminded myself in my notebook that when we go public, the old workshop's name must not be mentioned, letting the results speak for themselves. On day 3 morning, I did a final check of all tasks cleaned. The work area took the after completion photo from the same angle as the previous 2 days and matched it with the 10-point checklist. I set a 7-minute timer for the cross-checking step, and when the alarm rang, both signatures were at the bottom of the page, concise and solid. By midday, Marcus and I did the final test drive. He suggested a short challenge on a rough patch right around the corner to see if the smoothness held up. I agreed, recorded my impression, and concluded that the target was met. Marcus asked 2 direct questions. Had I made any promises beyond our capability, and what was needed to maintain these results over time? I answered that I had not overpromised, and that I would need 3 things: a clear maintenance schedule, a standard intake process that records vehicle condition from the start, and a follow-up call a week later to address minor adjustments. Back in the office, I immediately sent a summary email of the 3-day process, attaching the one-page overview before, mid, after, images and the signed checklist. My phone buzzed with an email confirming the green light for the internal launch early next week. I tapped confirm and attached the 3 photos, and a brief intro keeping the tone understated as agreed. With the internal piece done, I finalised the weekend schedule with Grant Patterson, locking in the agreed time and sending a task list for his review. Grant replied that he received it and would keep the appointment. I messaged Ethan with a quick meeting time for the week. He responded ready. The paperwork coordinator informed me that the meeting room for next week's preliminary signing was secured and that the remaining tools would be delivered on schedule. I saved the full 3-day test file in 2 locations, a printed copy in a folder and a digital version on both cloud storage and my handheld device. Before heading out, I looked at the whiteboard, now fully marked through with milestones, and felt a measured satisfaction that everything had followed its course. Speak less, write clearly, execute precisely. I turned off the workroom lights, carried the slim folder out to the lobby and saw a bag of food waiting on the bench. Tucked into the bag was a note hastily scribbled, "Eat while it's warm." Inside, a small folded piece of paper bore just one letter, SM. I slipped it into my wallet, planning to check the lobby camera footage in the morning. That night, back home, I did one final review of all confirmation emails, and the weekend schedule closed my laptop and went to bed early. 3 days wrapped up cleanly, quietly, and with enough proof to mark a principled beginning in a new place. The person outside the glass. This morning at the workshop, I reviewed the lobby camera footage from last night and paused at 1914. My mother stood outside the glass, holding a paper bag, hesitating for a few seconds before placing it on the bench with a note that read, "Eat while it's warm," then turned and walked away. I captured a still image with the timestamp, and date asked the receptionist to confirm, and she said my mother asked not to disturb me. She stood there for nearly 10 minutes before setting the bag down. I messaged my mother a clear line. I received the bag. "Thank you, I am keeping my decision. If you need to meet, please schedule in advance." She replied she just wanted me to eat something warm. I answered, "I'm okay, let's keep everything in writing as agreed." My calendar alert reminded me to finalise the internal launch file. I paused messaging and opened the internal launch folder to confirm the 3 before mid-after images from the same angles, the 2 approved client quotes, and a short introduction that made no mention of the old workshop. The paperwork coordinator did a final review, fixed 2 punctuation marks, and I emailed the package to Marcus along with the client callback schedule for each vehicle. A few minutes later, Marcus messaged requesting a 5-minute full rehearsal in the afternoon, straight to the point, no fluff. I opened the table of contents, read each section aloud within the time limit, and highlighted parts where I might speak too long to remind myself. Near noon, my mother messaged asking if we could meet for 15 minutes in the lobby. I agreed to 12:15. At the time, she stood from the waiting bench, looked me over and said she had watched me work through the glass and was proud. I said thank you, but I'm still not coming back. If you need anything, message or schedule, and I'll reply with clear documentation. The lobby staff reported increasing traffic, so I told my mother we had 2 more minutes. She nodded, reminded me to eat properly, then left. I saved the still image from the camera, kept our message exchange, and asked reception to log the visitor arrival and departure time so that if anyone misrepresented the visit, I'd have proof it was a personal check-in, not business. In the afternoon, Marcus sent an approval email internal launch set for Monday. No online posts, focus on real clients. I replied, received and attached the callback schedule with assigned leads. At that moment, Carlos messaged a link to the auction announcement for Thunderline Performance, and a photo of the tools my hammer marked with AR was listed in lot 27. I circled it in red on the list, deciding to attend with 2 rules: only repurchase items I had used and no public commentary. I informed Marcus requested a half-day leave, and he immediately approved setting a 15,000 cap for 3 priority items and told me to go ahead if they matched the list. I confirmed each price limit, listed the 3 priority items, and sent it to him and the paperwork coordinator. Less than 10 minutes later, the auction organizer updated the schedule tool. Lots would be shown 1 hour earlier. I adjusted the work calendar, arranged for the truck to arrive earlier, and the paperwork coordinator confirmed the documents and driver were ready. I prepared a more detailed item list, including the old hammer-chipped handle pliers and familiar measuring tools, starred the ones with personal markings to avoid confusion, printed 2 copies, one in my bag, one for the coordinator to issue invoices under Hale's name. That morning, I returned to the small meeting room for our 5-minute rehearsal with Marcus. I opened the internal launch folder and presented the 3 core sections: objectives, tasks accomplished, and driving impressions. Marcus asked 2 concise questions about maintaining results long term. I reiterated the importance of a clear maintenance schedule, documenting vehicle condition upon intake, and a follow-up call after 1 week. He nodded and confirmed that those details should remain unchanged in the final announcement. Back in the workshop, I carried the remaining food to the small kitchen and shared it with the 2 technicians who had supported the 3-day test run. One of the younger mechanics whispered, "Was that your mother earlier?" I nodded, told him to focus on finishing his part. "I've got the rest covered." I reviewed Marcus's confirmation email one last time, double-checked the meeting room scheduled for Monday, and gave the launch materials a final look before folding the cover and tucking it into the front pocket of my bag. Before leaving, I sent Mum a final message. "Thank you for the food, it was thoughtful." "I'm okay, take care of your health," she replied with a heart emoji. I locked in the auction date in my calendar and set 2 alarms close to the time. Then I forwarded the item list to Carlos with a note asking him to watch for anything he might recognize. From the old workshop, he replied he would keep an eye out, and reminded me to stay calm if I ran into anyone I knew there. I turned off my phone, stowed the keys safely, and headed out to the parking lot. Today felt warm enough to keep going forward. The boundary I set for myself on that first day still stood firm. This morning at the auction, I arrived early, received my bidder number, messaged Marcus that I had arrived, reviewed the list of 3 priority items, and their spending limits, confirmed that the truck and payment documentation under Hale's name were ready. Then I walked along the rows of lots, marking those I had used before: the hammer, engraved AR, the chipped handle pliers, and a small familiar measuring set. I skipped anything unfamiliar or beyond my needs. Carlos appeared, offered to help unload, and reminded me to remain calm if I ran into anyone I knew. In the hall, my father sat in the back row looking tired, and I did not see Jessa. I nodded at him and took my seat. When the bidding began, I followed my strategy, exactly only raised my paddle for the lots I had marked, withdraw immediately if the price exceeded my limit. The AR hammer lot drew fast bidding, so I waited for a pause. Raised my paddle once held firm and won below the limit. I also won the next 2 lots, the chipped-handled pliers, and the small set for a total still under my cap. I took photos of the winning slips and bidder number and sent them to the paperwork coordinator to prepare the invoice. Out in the hallway, my father approached, stopped at a respectful distance and apologised. I replied that I heard I'm keeping my decision. I hope he's well. Then I returned to complete the paperwork without arguing. Near the end, the organisers revealed the final lot, an old wooden sign in the back, storage faded letters and scratchy wood surface. I paused. A moment, remembered the 2 rules, then raised my paddle at a low bid. No one outbid me, and I won. I didn't buy it to show off, I bought it to remind myself of the value of doing the work right. I paid, received an invoice under Hale's name, checked items against lot numbers, signed the record. Carlos and the driver loaded everything onto the truck. I photographed the invoice and total cost and sent it to Marcus, who replied he received it and said, "Well done." On the drive back, I took the AR hammer from the bag. The handle was worn and felt both strange and familiar, then put it away to clean back at the shop. Back at Hale, we laid out a tarp, dried each piece, applied asset tags, placed the AR hammer on the workbench shelf, and stowed the pliers and small set in the drawer. The paperwork coordinator took a post-arrangement photo for the records. I wrote a 1-page report to Marcus, listing the lots, prices, limits, reasons for purchase, and photos. At the bottom, I noted that total cost was under the limit and the time of completion. He replied that internal launch would begin tomorrow, no online posting yet. I nodded, carried the wooden sign into the small room, wiped just enough dust to read the letters, and hung it on the wall behind the desk, not on the door. It's a reminder for myself, not a trophy. My phone lit with a message. Carlos said there was another big equipment lot, that my father had just stood and watched as the truck left, and that there were no issues. I replied, "Received, thank you," and put my phone away. I opened my planner and crossed a line, reacquired necessary items, done then scheduled follow-up calls to clients in the list 1 week later. Before turning off the lights, I sat quietly for a minute looking at the hammer on the shelf, the sign on the wall, and tomorrow's launch schedule. I felt neither triumph nor bitterness, just clarity that I had left the old place behind, bringing with me only what belonged to the work done right, and leaving the rest to time. Tomorrow, I will present for 10 minutes, go with the team to inspect cars, call clients on time, and continue the steady, precise tasks. I locked the door, put the key in my pocket, and walked out. Behind me, the wooden sign hung quietly on the new wall, and from today forward, every answer will lie in the smooth-running, powerful, durable cars that we deliver on time.